with Joe Burrow essentially came out and said high school kids need to strike while the iron is hot, go to the school that offers the most money. That's kind of the era we're in NIL. Now, this was a guy who started at Ohio State, obviously ended his career at LSU, got incredibly developed, right? Has a great NFL career. Did you find that take interesting? Do you think that just is where we are right now with college football? Should these high school kids just chase the bag, or should they, I don't know, take development into account, take system into account? Where are we on that?
I think it's an interesting comment from a guy who was obviously developed really, really well.
Yes.
To just go all money. But here's what I will say. Guys can, like, if you're an SEC level caliber player or you're an upper tier Big Ten caliber player, I don't know that the development is so much different amongst common programs.
Okay.
Like, I don't know that the development at Georgia is so much further ahead of Alabama or LSU or programs like that. Do I think it's ahead slightly?
No, is the development there better than your development at, I don't know, NC State? I would say probably yes.
Correct. But NC State's not offering the same kind of bag that a Georgia, LSU, or whatever.
But the top tier have.
Correct. And I think the next tier is probably pretty similar. And I think the next tier is probably pretty similar, right? Probably. Like, your development at Miami and Florida State are about the same. Your development at Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan are about the same. Now, more players get drafted off of the teams that win more because of a couple of things. One, they play longer. They play more games. They put more film on tape, right? Like, they usually recruit slightly better too. And so, yeah, I think I kind of agree with Burrow. Like, I think I'm kind of on the same page. Like, if your choices are the top 5 SEC programs, right? Texas, LSU, Georgia, and Bama, right? If those are our 5 or our top kind of 4 programs in the SEC right now. Right. If the bag is different at one of them, like, take the bigger bag, because none of those programs are developing you so much better for the NFL than the rest of them. And if your offer is Notre Dame, Ohio State, or Michigan, take the most money, because they all put players in the league at about the same rate. And so now, if you're at that next tier, if you're at the kind of the Ole Miss, Auburn, A&M level, same thing, right? Take where the bigger bag is, because all 3 of those programs are going to develop you at about the same rate, right? And so could there be slight variance?
What if you have 3 or 4 second tier offers and 1 or 2 top tier offers, and the money is bigger in your second tier offer? Because Georgia and some of these programs know that they develop you and pay a little bit less than schools that we would consider maybe the second tier, because the school at the second tier is struggling to attract that talent, so they are willing to pay more.
So let's say like a Georgia versus Auburn, where you've got probably a better shot to go to the league at Georgia. I don't know. So then it becomes, are you playing right away at Georgia? Would you rather put 3 years of film on tape at Auburn or 2 at Georgia, right? And maybe transfer out. So I don't know. I think every case is a little bit different. But I'd probably lean toward going where, also, making the next level is not a guarantee for many guys, right?
Sure. And that is definitely, if you're a guy that is not projected to be an NFL player, you're just going to be a nice college player. I totally understand
the bag.
Take it back. I think it matters. I think for a 5-star, development matters more, and getting on the field quickly and things like that matter more than the bag, because in theory, you're going to be making that NFL money as long as you continue to develop in the way that you should.
The other thing is too, I think coaches deserve a ton of like credit and blame for development, but ultimately, like, it didn't matter where Jeremiah Smith went to college. Like, he's going and playing for the best. But if Jeremiah Smith would have gone to Alabama, if he would have gone to Miami, if he'd have gone to Florida, he was still going to be the number 1 wide receiver drafted, because he's that kind of player, right? Sure. And same thing, like, if if Arch Manning had somehow ended up at Clemson, he was still going to be drafted as one of the top 3 quarterbacks. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I also think that do we maybe put a little bit of too much stock into the actual development? Like, I think it matters, but I also think that the player being elite going into
Well,
college
right. I
typically
think his
comes out
advice,
of college elite too.
yes, but I think the development matters for the mass majority of players who aren't elite. If we're going to consider elite those 5-star guys each year, there is, a few dozen 5-stars in college football at any given time, right? Like, let's say they stick around
32, yeah.
3 years. So you're talking about less than 70 in spread out over all of college football. Each team has a handful, except for the teams at the top who maybe have 2 handfuls. So I don't know. It's for everybody else. Development matters for everybody else. Those guys statistically are going to be fine wherever they go. But your 3 and 4-star guys, where you choose to go so that you get developed, does very much matter, because that's the difference between you playing in the league or not.
Yeah, it does, but within the context of taking a bigger bag, like I don't think anybody's offering this 3-star a huge. So I don't think they are as relevant to the conversation. Your low 4 stars, your
But
high
you
three
could
stars.
argue that they're the one that the bag matters more for too. Like that, they're in a hard situation because development matters for them, but they also have that thing where it's like, I may not make
Small
it. So
window.
do I
Yeah.
take the money now because it's security for me later, but it might actually hurt my development and long-term prospects. Like that is more of the tricky situation. These 5-star guys freaking take the bag and then you're making a bag later too.
Yeah, and I will say there's probably like if you made a Venn diagram, there's a pretty good Venn diagram of the teams that are developing the
Yeah,
best
for
and
sure.
paying the
Well,
most,
I'm
right?
sure.
So
Yeah.
it's not. I don't think it's like an impossible decision that these guys have to make.
No.
Most of the time, it's lined up pretty well, right?
Yeah.
Like if they're paying me the most, they probably have pretty good like Northwestern ain't offering a guy $10 million to come play there, right? So you
Right.
don't have to worry about like, oh man, I might not get developed as
Right.
well.
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, like, there are guys that are going to be first round draft picks that went to those mid tier SEC programs that are not the
Yeah.
Georgias and Alabamas, right? Like, and so, I do think that if they're offering you a pretty big bag, they probably have pretty good coaches. They're probably putting guys in the NFL
Yeah.
at a pretty high rate too. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's an impossible decision. So all that considered, like, yeah, I think you capitalize. I mean, break your leg in half and never play again, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'd see you got to take the bag when you take the bag. And if money's comparable and it's like, man, $1 million to play at Georgia or 900,000 to play at Florida, like, yeah, maybe, or I'm sorry, back that up, $1 million to play at Florida and 900,000 to play at Georgia, and you're a kid from South Carolina that has no allegiance to either. Yeah, maybe you take the $100,000 discount to play where you think there's a little more stability. But I don't know, man. I think you ultimately just have to go where there's the money. If the NBA, if a player's a free agent and the Lakers offer him 10 million and the Warriors offer him 8 million, I mean, he's going to play for $10 million. Like that's
Yeah,
just
but
what's
it's
happening.
also the pros, and that's the problem that some of us traditionalists are like, this isn't the pros. We don't want it to be the pros, and but here we are. And I'm interested to see, do these things change any with the NCAA settlement with the House? I mean, April is when we should have some more clarity on this, but does this in any way level the playing field? Does it make it more like professional football? Does it cut out kind of some of these middlemen? Greg Skanke was on with Paul Feinbaum this week, and they were kind of talking about it, and I know you had some issues with some of the things he said in regards to collectives. Which I believe essentially what he said is we have to fix this system. We have some of these collectives making deals and then they can't even pay it. And your point essentially is like, well, the collectives shouldn't be making deals that they can't keep their word on, right?
Yeah, I have a hard time feeling bad for collectives that are not able to fulfill on promises they made. Right? I have a hard time shedding any
And
tears over that.
I don't shed any tears for the collectives, but I took it as he was saying like the player got screwed. That we have these third party
Yeah.
people that are potentially out there negotiating deals, and college students don't know any better, so they sign them and they commit themselves to this school because of what was promised by a third party, and the third party's not following through, and now that kid is
which is
at that
which is
school.
Yeah, which is why there's an entire avenue of contracts law, and we
Yeah.
need to see more. Like
Yeah.
if a collective, and I don't care if it's Florida State's collective, I don't care if it's Florida, I don't care if it's Miami, Alabama, whatever. If a collective, if it is Florida State's collective that is making a promise of we're going to pay you X if you do Y, and they're not living up to that, I want to see more collectives in court. I don't feel
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
I am fully on board with seeing more lawsuits if that's what's happening, right? If
Right.
Sankey's right and there are collectives that are making promises that they can't keep, yeah, I want to see them in court, right? We've already started to see that some, right?
Yeah.
Florida had a situation. Florida State's got one in basketball. Good, put them in court. If they're making promises they can't keep, sue them for everything they've got, right? Especially if it's in writing or it's written down somewhere or whatever. Like, yeah, sign your contracts and you need to pay up, right? Because yeah, I am not here for the athlete getting screwed, but this unsustainable world that we live in right now that Sankey's talking about is here because, let's be honest, his coaches, the Big Ten coaches, ACC, Big 12 coach, are making massive promises. And if
Yeah.
the collectives can't fulfill that, yeah, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the kids. I feel bad for the kids, but
No, yeah, I don't feel bad.
I don't feel bad for the schools or the programs or
I
the,
don't feel bad for any of the adults in the situation.
ESPN's writing the SEC $1 billion a year check. Share with the players, man. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, fulfill your promises.
I thought
I
it
don't
was
feel a lot of
interesting. One
sympathy.
of the things he said in that quote was that he talked about how he's hoping that once these rules go into place, that what he's saying is to essentially save college football, that we come up with something sustainable for college football. And then he hopes that the members abide by that. And I think essentially what he's saying is that he is expecting that these schools will stop coming up with workarounds for all these rules. And that to me just seems so pie in the sky. Like, of course,
Yeah.
there is 0% chance that in this ultra competitive sport that people are going to stop trying to come up with a workaround to game the system. Like, that's not realistic at all.
Yeah, no, and I know you've got connects at Florida. Like I've spoken with people at Florida and asked about this whole cap and house settlement and if a collective is paying, that's going to be outside of the cap, obviously. And there is and they're not the only ones. Like I've actually spoken with somebody at Georgia too. There is no intention from major SEC programs and then most programs in general that are competing at this level
Follow the rules.
there's no rule against paying
Right.
outside of the cap, right? Like now again, you go look at a school like I don't know, like well, no, they're paying a lot. Like is Houston right in the Big 12? Or is Wake Forest? They're not even gonna touch the cap, so it's not as relevant for them. They're not paying $20 million a year right now in NIL across all sports anyway, so it's less relevant for them. But you're telling me that Ohio State's gonna all of a sudden put their budget down to 18 million and that be for all sports? You're telling me that Michigan's gonna do that, Notre Dame's gonna do that, Florida State, Miami, like that ain't happening. And so it is very
is it just brought us back to the time of $10,000 handshakes, right? Like, if we agreed that your payment as a student athlete is your room and board and tuition, and that's what it is across the board, and then we would have schools with cash handshakes, right? That went to players that happened under the table.
But they don't even have to be under the table now. They can still just operate through legal contracts through collectives. Like the collectives aren't going anywhere. They're not going to ban them.
I mean, but let's say they do, right? I did hear some discussion about them saying like, you will not spend $1 outside of this money. And if that happens, you go right back to the cash handshakes. But my point was that the collectives are the proverbial handshakes, right? They're the if this is where we hope you all stay, you've got this over here still going on. And
yeah, I think schools, just to be very frank, I think schools would like to get rid of collectives, just in large part, right? Some schools, I'm not going to lump every single school. I think schools would like to get rid of it, and they would like for it to just
because I think there is a little bit more parity, and it's more like offensive tackle and this like.
I don't think they. Yeah, that'd be great for us. I don't think the schools care about the parity. I think they just want all the money flowing through. Like the athletic directors want all the money flowing through them, and so they don't want like Scott Strickland or Michael Alford or any of these ADs. They don't want you giving money to your collective, right? Now they do in a competing sense, but they would much rather you just write all of those checks to Gator boosters or or Seminole boosters. They would rather that money flow through them. Let's be honest, right? And so they don't want to be competing with these collectives for money. They want money flowing for buildings and coaches and things that they can actually impact. Because let's be real, that's what their job is, not how well of a roster. And so if it's all level and it's all even, the parity is back from that, then great. And the money's coming to us, not this outside entity that's affiliated with us, but we're not touching any of that revenue. They want the revenue for themselves. And so I wonder how much I don't think they're doing it. Greg Sankey's point, I don't think he's, necessarily doing this out of the goodness of his heart. I think he knows that his presidents and his ADs and everybody else, they want the money back into the schools. They don't want it outside of the schools.
Right.